So I came from a newspaper reporter background. I actually was a reporter covering high school football in Virginia, and then I was covering general assignment in Florida. And when I got into, then I hit the recession. So I really had a forced reinvention, which took me into the interactive publishing space. So the interactive publishing space is a really exciting, engaging place. And I think as far as forced reinventions go, mine was very fortuitous because it brought me to content marketing. And that's where I ended up landing back in Cleveland. I wanted to come back here, and this is, if you didn't know, kind of the epicenter of B2B publishing in North America. So there's a lot of opportunities here. I worked for a publisher, and then I joined North Coast Media 5 years ago when it was a startup. It had spun off from a larger media company. So at that time, I was a digital department of one, a very stressful time, and it was an interesting thing because digital then was one person in digital and two people in IT, and we were all just kind of working together. And today, we are a digital department of 9 and growing, and we have almost tripled revenues on the digital side, largely thanks to content marketing. So I hope that if you leave here today, you'll go away with some actionable tips that you can take back to your workplaces, because I know that you're all evangelists for content marketing, but help you to do the same with your coworkers and your organization. So North Coast Media is a really interesting story because we started with 6 brands, the youngest of which is 30 years old, and the oldest of which is 101 years old. We've really been in the content marketing business for over 100 years. In fact, if you didn't know, the term advertorial was coined in 1917, so it's celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. And we've been doing it marketing our own content, but only in the last 5 years have we been doing it as far as marketing our advertisers and marketing partners' content through our distribution channels. I was really fortunate to come in with 6 brands that are in 3 very disparate markets. On the services side, and we're in the green industry with golf, landscape, and pest management professional. Then we're on the technology side, covering the software and hardware of positioning systems. And then on the industrial side, we're covering propane and above ground mining. So we had a vast history to work with, but we also had a lot of interesting markets to test against each other and to find out new and interesting things about which channels work for which messages. And that's what I'm going to share here today. So we didn't have to start at square one, I will say that, and that was really nice, but we did get to build some best-in-breed technologies that worked for us. So my background, like I said, was in journalism. You're not supposed to smile like this when you're covering wildfires in Florida, but I was behind the safe line. I wasn't out there doing the scary work, and I always say that those who, people say those who can't do teach. I say those who can't do write, and that's why I got into journalism, because I love to write and I love to tell stories. And that's the same thing that has served me since I've come over to the content marketing side, although now I'm doing a lot more multimedia, so I'm more behind the camera and telling the stories of those people who run golf courses across the country, things like that. I think that's a takeaway that you can always have, is that there's always a commonality in your audience. In the news media, that's really easy because it's your local audience. People are combined by or brought together by their geography. On the B2B side, we're brought together by our careers, professions, and aspirations. So good content is good content. Recently, we had formed a content marketing committee at North Coast Media, and that helped us to do push forward a lot of interesting initiatives. But one of them was to do some research where we surveyed our editorial advisory boards and our most engaged readers and subscribers and users. And we found out that 93% of them believe that as long as content is good and is well labeled, that they find it trustworthy. And that 75% trusted the last piece of editorial branded sponsored content that they'd read with us based on the fact that it came from a trusted media partner. And it was really exciting. I was in Jay's session from Quartz a little bit ago, earlier today, and they had recently done some very similar research among their readers of executive leadership, and that was interesting to see that they had very similar results from that survey. So, but you have to have the right channel, otherwise it's like the tree falling in the forest analogy. You're not going to get the audience to come to it. You have to give it out in the right channels for them. And so before I get started, I wanted to kind of go through some quick definitions of the term channel to differentiate between mediums and platforms, because I do hear a lot of confusion about what term means what. So there are actually as many definitions of channel as there are channels themselves. This is the 4th in Merriam-Webster out of 11. So keep that in mind. But here's some breakdown of the definition of channel. First of all, there has to be an exchange that occurs. There has to be some symbolism to that exchange, and you have to choose various mediums that are going to convey that symbolism. You also have to have a customer's journey in mind when you're choosing the right channel, and there should be context to whatever facts you're providing. And then lastly, you want to make sure that whatever data you give, you also give a face to that data and a story to that data. So I'm going to talk about some ways that you can reevaluate and re-envision your channel marketing and come up with the best practices. So there's really 7 steps. They fall into 3 silos in planning, producing, and perfecting. And I hope that you'll be able to take this away as some ideas that you can take back to your organizations. So the first thing, planning your program, you want to take this to get the strategy down. So I really hope that the Cavs had some strategy in the Kyrie Irving situation, but that's going to be that you're kind of white whale there. So first of all, you have to get over your own maybe misconceptions or beliefs that may be hindering your chances to meet your audiences where they are. So first of all, is if you build it, they will come. And well, I love baseball, and the Indians won now 14 straight, in case you didn't know. But if you build it, they will come is only going to work in the movies. Nowadays, people are very busy, and you're competing not just against your competitors in the space, so you're also competing against all of the things that vie for a person's attention and time, their kids' little league practice, and all of the other media and things that they're consuming throughout their day. There's also the notion that print is dead. And while Egon Spengler is obviously a very intelligent guy for what he's done with the Ghostbusters, he didn't know what he was talking about because that was 30 years ago. And at North Coast Media, we've seen print magazine circulations rise for 5 consecutive years now. And Pew just did some research that came out earlier this year that showed that people still choose print as their preferred form of reading long-form writing. And then there's the old Batman adage about stay tuned, same bat time, same bat channel. If you're waiting at the same time and at the same channel for your audiences to come and find you, you'll be sorely disappointed. So I'm going to talk a little bit later, actually, about the timing component of this. But also keep in mind that the big thing that you take away from this is that there are a lot of different channels to consider. So as long as you don't fall into these traps, you will be okay and your marketing plan will work. So here's some new theories to keep in mind and some new wisdom to take back and share with people whenever they try to create or give you those same old adages that you just heard. One is that your audience should always come first. And I think everybody here probably reads Joe Polizzi's blog, but he's the first one to say that you have to have an audience first and a product second. And then I would say that you also then need to have your message before your channel after you have already had your audience. So I'm not going to talk too much about building your audience here, your audience development component of that, but I am happy to provide some guidance on that. And I would say that if you're trying to create an audience from scratch, there are a lot of really good methods and things out there for you to do and to use that are free and available to you, largely thanks to Google, Facebook, and Twitter. So also you need to look at your lead generation as a relationship component, not as a funnel. It's interesting how we all talk about the funnel, but there's nothing more impersonal than viewing your lead generation as a people mill. So I hope that when you go back from here today and you go back to your offices and you're talking to your colleagues, you're not going to talk about the number of leads generated. You're going to talk about the number of people you met and the number of stories you heard. And then finally, this is the part that Jay, who gave the keynote yesterday morning, talked about, was constraints. And I thought this was really interesting. So I'm the daughter of an operations management professor. So I'm probably the only person who read the goal before I went to B school. And maybe you read this in your MBA programs or your business programs. But essentially the component here is that instead of thinking of the one time and the one channel, we're going to think of many channels that match up to one goal that we have and one constraint that we need to overcome. So the theory of constraints that shows up in the goal is really on the manufacturing and operations side is talking about there's 3 main constraints: throughput, inventory, and expenses. The marketing version of the theory of constraints is your throughput is your ability to have enough staff to do your projects, and that's one of the things that I find personally affects my team because we're a rather small team with a lot of projects. The second of that is the expenses, and again, your budget. A lot of people I know have very limited budgets, so you have to choose what you can do best with that. And the third component of that, in looking at your ability to conduct what you're trying to accomplish, is making sure that you have the right team in place to do that as well. So making sure that the inventory component is talking about the fact that you would have to have the right marketing channels and the right distribution channels available to you. So I think one of the interesting things that comes up a lot when we talk about distribution channels is everybody's trying to do their own maybe in-house. If you sat through Joseph Gordon-Levitt before here, you heard him talk about branded content. A lot of people are trying to do their own branded content and then use it as owned media and distribute entirely themselves. What we're missing out on there is the opportunity to build relationships with creative agencies, with buying agencies, and with publishers, and with others in our space or with like-minded marketing professionals that we can use to create complementary distribution channels. And then as far as goals go, we're not looking at KPIs, we're just looking at which one of these main lead generation or brand awareness type goals that you're trying to accomplish through each of your campaigns. So focusing is going to mean stick with a message. I'm the kind of person who can get easily distracted. My team's #1 goal at work is to make cool stuff, so I'm always like, this is something really cool, we should go try and do this. But when you're doing your campaign, you want to find that one cool thing and stick with it throughout the campaign. So the way you can do this is really to use a journalistic method, the 5 W's and the H. So this is just asking some very simple questions developed from the Socratic method. So if you had to take that class as an undergrad, you probably remember these terms. This is really your existential crisis. You need to ask yourself, #1, who cares? #2, what problem do they have that I can solve? And then ask yourself, where are they and what time are they at those places? And then why would they choose me over my competitors? What is my core differentiator? And then how am I going to make this all work together and put this all together? So this is these are 2 projects that we did for clients in the pest management professional marketplace. So the pest marketplace, there are roughly 20,000 businesses total in North America who provide pest services to clients. So companies that come out and kill bugs at your house or whatever, or at your business. So these are 2 web pages, custom web pages that we did for clients in that space, and these are just headlines. So I want to point out that the content was great on both of them. They both had very good media, very good, one had really great videos, another one had a takeaway and some custom research that you could download. But there's one clear winner here when we look for just the headlines alone. So if we diagram this headline, the reasons this headline succeeded are #1, it has the how-to, so that component matches up very closely to SEO goals and to the way people naturally search on Google. We have to repel birds, so we've clearly defined who the audience is for this market. It's a very specific subset of the pest management professional market, the people who provide bird services, which is actually a very small niche in the market. And then we also have some great keywords in the physical barrier, because without a physical barrier, because that is another item that most people would typically use as a physical barrier to prevent birds. So the top article is good, but it doesn't clearly say who the audience is. You may not know just from reading this headline, or if you came up in Google, that versatile aerosols are used for termites or are used for bed bugs, things like that. So here's just the numbers to kind of to support the fact that that second post did a lot better. Even though it had a shorter campaign life and had a smaller number of possible impressions, because it was really just a very, very tight niche, like I mentioned, it had a larger number of page views, engagements, and most importantly, total time spent, which is what we're really trying to activate now in our marketing partners who are using content marketing channels, is to really start to analyze engagements and time spent beyond just impressions. So you don't want to go all matchy-matchy with your clothes, but you do want to go all matchy-matchy with your messages and your channels. And one of the ways that we do this is we assess all of our channels and we view them as being building a house around our audience. So this is a core audience member for us in our landscape management market. His name's Scott Burke. He's the owner of Scott's Landscaping in State College, Pennsylvania. He really embodies our average reader, our average longtime brand advocate. He's about 50 years old, has been in business for over 20 years, and has been using landscape management as his key resource for growing his business during that time. Now, he has a great story because he personally went through a fire at his business and had to rebuild everything. But that's who we're talking to, is a guy like Scott who's utilizing the landscape management products. Now, these are all of the channels, and we view our channels as product lines at our company. But these are all of our channels. These are not all of the channels that are out there for you. In fact, we would love to have more channels on there, but these are our core competencies and the ones that we do best as a publisher and a media company. So when you're choosing your channels, you really want to think about how you're using those channels. Are you using them as a traffic driver, so you're hoping that people will spend a short amount of time on that channel and then move on to something else? Or are you using them as your destination? Your beach destination, a great place where people want to stay, and you want them to spend a lot of time and really absorb and utilize that content. And then there's the ones that cross over. You saw there were a few that crossed over. Those are really what I look at as the RVs of marketing channels. They're both the journey and the destination. And so here's a campaign that we did. Again, it has the main destination component was a very large, a long-form how-to piece on core aeration for landscape management professionals, so very specific. And we utilized a variety of different marketing channels to drive traffic to that page. And those channels were some with us and some through other networks like retargeting. And then, so that campaign, I'll talk about the metrics on that, the success metrics on that in a few minutes. But first of all, when you're matching your message to your channel, you really want to start to look, first of all, at the amount of time that you hope for people to engage, and then also some of the differentiators in your audience here. So I'm going to talk about a little about the website side of it. So as I mentioned, Landscape Management Magazine is one of our core magazines, and we have Scott Burke, who's a longtime reader and very engaged. But when we started to look at who our audience was on our website, we realized it didn't look quite like Scott. It looks more like Hunt Davis here, somebody who's in his 30s, has been in business for under 10 years, and uses a lot of technology tools to grow his business. So that's who we're speaking to when we're speaking on the website and when we're trying to message a campaign. So if we're working with a marketing partner, we're going to say if this is who you want to reach as someone who's newer in their business, the right channel for you is going to be the website. We want it to be interactive, short, and fun, and these are a lot of this stuff we're finding both from traditional market research where we're doing panels, research interviews, doing a lot of surveys, things like that, but we're also utilizing the tools that you can get through Google Analytics and through Facebook Insights, Twitter, and other forums to really do some listening to how people are utilizing your brand and how they view your brand. So when I say sexy, that's one of the things that we talk about for GPS World. This was an interesting fact when we started to mine Experian data and Google Analytics data, was that we found out that GPSworld.com users were on our website and they were concurrently creating their dating profiles, and that based on their credit card purchases that they were paying for those dating services. Which matched up to a lot of things that we had seen, activities on the site, long amounts of time spent on long-form reading that we didn't see on our other sites. And we started to realize that that's because they're doing a lot of this research at the same time that they're thinking about how best to market themselves out on to, I guess, their future spouses and that kind of thing. So I think it's really a great privilege for us to be the site where people are coming and thinking about their future. But it's also something for us to keep in mind when we're creating that content. We want it to be forward-looking. We want it to be fun. We want it to be filled with heavy research and things, but also something that's going to be really addressing them as young professionals in their business. And the core audience, I should say, on gpsworld.com is PhD candidates and young engineers. So we know who that person is, and we want to speak to that person with their content.